Welcome, dear listeners, to the Softly Spoken Science Podcast. I'm your host, the Softly Spoken Science Nerd, bringing you bedtime stories calculated to raise your knowledge level. This podcast is dedicated to the belief that a good, calm science talk will put you right to sleep. If you feel like this might be the case, hit like and subscribe now, and tap the little bell to be notified about the next video. Then make yourself comfortable, and let's drift away. Tonight we are returning to one of my favorite old dinosaur books, the Dinosaur Society's Dinosaur Encyclopedia, by Don Lessem and Donald Glut. It was one of the most scientifically serious mass-market dinosaur books of the 1990s. This was the era of the first two Jurassic Park films, just after we knew dinosaurs were warm-blooded, just before we knew they had feathers, and I thought their extinction was just a few thousand years ago. It's been almost 30 years now. Let's see how it holds up. This book is organized alphabetically. Last time we reviewed from Amygdalodon to Allosaurus. Tonight we will review from Alocodon to Azendohsaurus. Alocodon kuehnei. This species is named for the crowns of its teeth, which show that Alocodon was a small plant eater. One school of thought contends that Alocodon is an intermediate species between Lesothosaurus and Hypsilophodon. Another suggests it evolved independently from a small ornithischian ancestor. Most dinosaur experts agree, however, that there is too little material available to speculate meaningfully on Alocodon's ancestry. Altispinax dunkeri. Altispinax was a large carnivore described from a peculiar broken tooth crown found near Hanover, Germany. Instead of serrations like the teeth of other carnivorous dinosaurs, this tooth had a thickened blade-like edge. However, there is no reliable way to tell whether the serrations were present in life or were worn away after death. The isolated teeth from which this genus is known were later linked to several vertebrae found at an English site and belonging to the dinosaur Altispinax. Alvarezsaurus calvoi. The partial skeleton of this small meat-eating dinosaur was found on a riverbank near the Argentine National University's Museum of Natural Science. Like most of the other late Cretaceous dinosaurs of South America, Alvarezsaurus was quite different from its northern hemisphere relatives. In this case, it was so different that a whole new family of theropods, Alvarezsauridae, was created just to accommodate it. Alvarezsaurus was lightly built, with the slender legs and long feet of a fast runner. Whether this animal's speed evolved to help it escape from larger and slower predators, or to chase down small, quick prey, we cannot tell. No forelimb bones have yet been found for Alvarezsaurus, but a shoulder blade suggests that its arms and hands were not used for walking, but for catching and holding things. The tail was very long, slender, and flattened from side to side. It probably made up more than half of this dinosaur's total length. Perhaps Alvarezsaurus' oddest feature was the extremely short spines on its vertebrae, making this dinosaur's back very smooth, without the ridge that other theropods had. What purpose this served, and how it might be related to the dinosaur's other adaptations for speed, cannot be guessed without knowing more of the animal's skeleton. Well, it occurs to me that Alvarezsaurus was like the cheetah of its time period. Its whole build was for speed. A tail does a lot of things for a bipedal theropod. It works like a lever and balances the front half of the animal. It also acts to balance the differences in forces in the animal's stride, and uses angular momentum to store the energy from the animal's forward momentum and create a more efficient gait. It especially saves energy on changing direction. What you get with a longer lever is more angular momentum. So Alvarezsaurus, with a really long tail, had a really versatile, effective counterweight to help it balance and course correct at high speeds. It probably hunted, among other things, small mammals, which were probably slower than most dinosaurs in a linear contest. But if they stayed close to home and stayed alert, they could dodge and scamper back to their burrow in plenty of time to escape most attackers. Amargasaurus cazaui. Recently discovered, Amargasaurus may be one of the most bizarre-looking of all dinosaurs. The large four-legged browser was distinguished from all other sauropods by the elongated spines on its neck, back, and tail vertebrae. These spines were paired, so the living animal had not one but two rows of spines up its back. Unfortunately, we cannot tell whether the spines in the living dinosaur supported two thin parallel sails running down the neck and back, or one thick sail. In either case, Amargasaurus cazaui must have presented a striking appearance. The purpose of this bony mane is uncertain. The scientists who describe Amargasaurus speculated that the elongated spines served a defensive function, presenting an obstacle to a large predator that tried to bite through the Amargasaurus neck. In addition, they may have proved useful in intimidating rivals during mating season. Finally, all these spines, particularly if they formed two parallel sails, would have significantly increased the animal's body surface, thus helping to keep it cool. Tall neural spines evolved in a variety of dinosaur groups that lived near the equator, especially during the early Cretaceous period. Perhaps all of them used their sails for cooling in a hot environment. The skeleton of Amargasaurus is complete from the back of the skull to the base of the back. Elephant-sized, it was small for a sauropod, and very similar to the late Jurassic period African dinosaur, Dicraeosaurus. When I was a creationist, I had to suppose Amargasaurus and its relative Dicraeosaurus were both identical to Diplodocus. Ammosaurus major. Ammosaurus was a medium-sized member of the prosauropod family, primitive large plant eaters with small heads, long necks, and large bodies. This animal was discovered by quarrymen and described more than a century ago. The great Yale University dinosaur scientist, Othniel Charles Marsh, managed to salvage only the back half of the specimen because the sandstone block containing it had already been broken apart and built into a bridge near South Manchester, Connecticut. In 1969, a nearby sandstone bridge was demolished and more parts of Ammosaurus skeleton were found. But all we have now of this animal are the incomplete remains, 3 vertebrae, some hip bones, and both hind limbs of a few specimens of varying sizes. When I was a creationist, I had to think all prosauropods were the same, especially all plateosaurids. Amphicoelias altus. This large four-legged plant eater belonged to the Diplodocid family, which was distinguished by its members' long whip-like tails. Amphicoelias may be the same animal as one of the better-known Diplodocids, Diplodocus or Barosaurus, from the American West. Amphicoelias has the honor of being the first sauropod to have a published life restoration. In 1897, famed dinosaur artist Charles R. Knight showed an underwater group of Amphicoelias feeding on plants and sticking their heads above the surface, snorkel fashion, to breathe. This image was responsible for the now outmoded idea that sauropods were aquatic animals. Amphicoelias is a textbook case for the paleontological debate between lumpers and splitters. Is it a new species of Diplodocus or Barosaurus, or is it a new genus of Diplodocid sauropod? That's a proper matter of debate for professionals. But when I waded into this debate as an amateur creationist, I was basically on a mission to lump whole genera and even families together into as few kinds as possible, so it would make sense that 2 of each could have fit on Noah's Ark for a year, with hardly any ventilation, only 8 zookeepers, and not a single piece of automatic equipment between them. Amtosaurus magnus. This dinosaur was first described as a large ankylosaur, or club-tailed, armored dinosaur related to Talururus. Unfortunately, the only known specimen is an incomplete brain case. Recent re-examination of the fossil raised the possibility that it came from a duckbill. Amygdalodon patagonicus. This medium-sized four-legged herbivore, a sauropod known from an incomplete skeleton, is the most primitive sauropod known from South America. Its almond-shaped teeth resemble those of the British sauropod Cardiodon, which is thought to be a synonym of Cetiosaurus. Amygdalodon was closely related to the later South American cetiosaurid, Patagosaurus. Assuming it was a cetiosaurid, it would not have been a large one. Amygdalodon's discovery indicates that cetiosaurids enjoyed a worldwide distribution during the Middle Jurassic period. Cetiosaurs were a family of early-ish large sauropods mainly from the Middle Jurassic. Professional paleontologists recognize them as more basal than Diplodocus and Camarasaurus, which are more derived. When I was a creationist, I would have had to think all cetiosaurs were basically the same as Camarasaurus. Out of the late Jurassic sauropods, Camarasaurus stands out with a comparatively basal design. If on one hand I lumped Cetiosaurus in with Camarasaurus, then on the other hand I would have to lump Camarasaurus in with other macronarian sauropods like Brachiosaurus. Creationists imagined the few dinosaurs in a plastic toy set and supposed two of each of those might just fit on Noah's Ark just fine to represent all the diversity of Dinosauria. However, in reality there are so many groups of sauropods alone, all clearly different, all clearly related by common ancestry. How many created kinds are they supposed to be? Of course, nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. Anatosaurus. Invalid. See Edmontosaurus. Anatotitan copei. This large duck-billed plant eater was one of the last of the dinosaurs, living close to the end of the Mesozoic era. Its muzzle was flattened into the longest, broadest duckbill among the hadrosaurs. Anatotitan's key feature is that the entire front half of its snout lacked teeth, a longer toothless section than in any other duckbill. Anatotitan also had longer and more slender limbs than its relative Edmontosaurus, and although Anatotitan was almost as long as Edmontosaurus regalis, it was more lightly built. Anatotitan was also comparatively scarce. Dozens of specimens of Edmontosaurus annectans have been collected in the American West, but only 5 or 6 of Anatotitan copei. Anatotitan longiceps. This species grew to 40 to 45 feet long and 3 to 4 tons in weight, judging from a jawbone. There is some speculation that this animal is an intermediate between Edmontosaurus annectans and Anatotitan copei. In 1993, paleontologists weren't sure yet what to call the slight differences between Anatotitan and Edmontosaurus. As a creationist, I struggled to keep from comprehending the diversity of duck-billed dinosaurs. Some of them had elaborate head crests designed to make sounds, and they are all related. Some of them did not, and they are all related. If I was a creationist today, I would probably have to think there was only one created kind of duck-billed dinosaur in the beginning. I would say it included all the genetic information to make all the crests at the time of creation, and over time each family of dinosaur lost a little more of that information, resulting in their different head crests or lack thereof. Certainly, a creationist can imagine all Hadrosauria as one created kind. But then, are hadrosaurs the same as Iguanodon? Anchiceratops ornatus. Anchiceratops was a medium-sized horned dinosaur with a large head and long frill. Like other dinosaurs of the ceratopsid family, its distinguishing features were the shapes and arrangement of its horns and frill. Anchiceratops' outward diverging brow horns were larger than its nose horn. Its long rectangular frill was decorated with large bones that gave it a distinctive, strongly scalloped edge. Some individuals had additional knobs sticking up from the back of the frill. Since we know only the skull, we cannot be certain about the rest of Anchiceratops. Anchisaurus polyzelus. Anchisaurus was one of the most primitive lizard-hipped saurischian prosauropods, or plant-eating dinosaurs. We know it was a plant eater because it had finely serrated leaf-shaped teeth, quite unlike the sickle-shaped teeth of meat-eating dinosaurs. Equipped with large eyes, Anchisaurus' narrow, lightly built skull tapered to a blunt point in front. Its neck was long and slender, and its body had a long trunk. Its forelimbs ended in large 5-digit hands. The first digit was strong and affixed with a thick claw. For most of the 100-plus years after its discovery, Anchisaurus was thought to be a Triassic period dinosaur. This notion was overturned in the late 1970s when the rocks in which it was found were determined to be from the early Jurassic. This made Anchisaurus one of the later prosauropods. Anchisaurus sinensis. Anchisaurids were not confined solely to North America during the early Jurassic. This species existed in China during that time. A small, long-necked plant eater like Anchisaurus polyzelus, it shared the landscape with its much larger relative, Lufengosaurus kuehnei. Andesaurus delgadoi. Andesaurus was a large four-legged herbivore, about the same size as the late Jurassic sauropod Camarasaurus from the western United States. Titanosaurids, Andesaurus included, were abundant in South America during the last dinosaur period, the Cretaceous, even though sauropods had almost entirely disappeared from North America by then. The tail anatomy of the Andesaurus was unusual among titanosaurs. In this species, the tail vertebrae were joined together by ball and socket joints. Both the front and back ends of the vertebrae were flattened. Andesaurus' rear back vertebrae had tall spines, which helps to set it apart from other sauropods. The vertebrae are well over 2 feet high and are similar to those of the even larger titanosaurid Amargasaurus. In the 1990s, a lot less was known about titanosaurs, but already for a creationist's comfort, they looked too close to Camarasaurus, yet too different. Ankylosaurus magniventris. Ankylosaurus is among the best known of all the armored club-tailed dinosaurs for whom its family, the Ankylosaurids, is named. This animal has been widely and wrongly illustrated with drawings based on a mistaken description by the American Museum of Natural History prospector Barnum Brown. Brown thought Ankylosaurus was a stegosaur and reconstructed its skeleton with a high arch. He thought Ankylosaurus' mostly circular armor plates were arranged like cobblestones. Later studies have shown that Ankylosaurus was built lower to the ground, and its body was not completely plated. Armor did extend to the animal's bony eyelids, which worked like window shades to protect the eyes from attackers. The armor patterns of Ankylosaurus was similar to that of its earlier relative, Amtosaurus, though on a larger scale. Ankylosaurus' tail club was a formidable weapon. The vertebrae of the back 1/3 were immobilized by overlapping connections that turned it into a solid handle. The club itself was made out of several armor plates that fused into a single unit, with the 2 largest plates on either side of the club. Ankylosaurus was not just the last of the ankylosaurids, it was also the largest. A skull about 76 centimeters long would have belonged to an animal perhaps 9 meters long. Ankylosaurus bones are not common. Only 3 good specimens and a handful of fragmentary remains are known. This may be because Ankylosaurus did not live in the river deltas where most dinosaur fossils were buried. It may have lived on higher ground, and the bits and pieces we have may be from animals that died along a riverbank and were washed downstream. Anoplosaurus curtinotus. Anoplosaurus was an iguanodontid, a large bird-hipped dinosaur with big spike-like thumbs. It was named and long misidentified from fragmentary remains originally thought to belong to a small, possibly juvenile armored dinosaur. The lower jaw measured only 6 centimeters long, and the upper arm would have been only 24 centimeters long. The absence of armor plates on what he thought were the skeletal remains of an armored dinosaur caused Harry Govier-Seeley, the British scientist who named this find in 1879, to call it Anoplosaurus, unprotected lizard. Because of the fragmentary nature of the fossils, we do not know what kind of dinosaur Anoplosaurus represents. Anseramimus planonicus. Anseramimus was an ostrich-mimic dinosaur, one of the long-legged, nearly toothless carnivores of the ornithomimid family. It is known from a single partial skeleton from which the skull is missing. Anseramimus had more powerful forelimbs than other ornithomimids. Like other ornithomimids, its arms, hands, and spade-like claws all seemed designed for rooting through loosely packed soil or plant matter, and perhaps were used for digging up insects or nests of eggs. The discoveries of Anseramimus and several other Asian ornithomimids indicate that these animals may have been even more diverse in Asia than in North America. Antarctosaurus vickmanianus. Antarctosaurus was the largest dinosaur known in the southern hemisphere, and one of the biggest animals ever to walk the earth. Weighing as much as 50 tons, this enormous four-legged browser was a member of the titanosaur family. This species is one of the few titanosaurids for which some of the skull bones have been described. The skull would have been only about 60 centimeters long and quite high, with large eye holes and weak jaw muscles. The teeth were located only at the very front of the mouth. As in some other titanosaurids, Antarctosaurus' hind limbs were substantially longer than its forelimbs. This would have given its back a majestic arch, like those in Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. The neck may have been short and upwardly inclined. Antarctosaurus was named from a number of bones, probably belonging to a single individual, found in Argentina in 1916. Other finds in Uruguay and Chile seem to indicate that this species was widespread in South America during the closing stages of the Mesozoic. Antrodemus, invalid. See Allosaurus. Apatodon, doubtful. See Allosaurus. Apatosaurus ajax. This giant dinosaur is among the best known and most commonly represented of all dinosaurs, usually referred to by the name Brontosaurus. Apatosaurus, though not quite as colossal as Antarctosaurus, Seismosaurus, and Supersaurus, was an enormous four-legged browsing dinosaur. It was a member of the diplodocid family of long-necked sauropods with whip-like tails. Apatosaurus' thick neck and prominent lower back ribs distinguished it from other diplodocids. Its backbones had forked spines at the base of the neck and in front of the tail, which in life would have given the animal twin ridges along part of the neck and back. These spines supported the large ligaments or tendons that held up the neck and tail. A short back and forelimbs suggests that this dinosaur may have been able to rear up on its hind legs, using the tail as a third leg for support. Standing on all four legs, an Apatosaurus would have been able to raise only the front third of its neck to fully vertical. By rising on its hind legs, it would have increased its feeding range to as much as 50 feet into the treetops. Apatosaurus may have been a solitary forest forager. Remains are relatively rare and are among the least likely to be found with other skeletons. Apatosaurus skeletons are found distant from large bodies of water and from the fossils of aquatic animals such as fish and crocodiles. This indicates that Apatosaurus, like most sauropods, spent most of its time on land, contrary to its once popular image as a swamp dweller. The confusion over Apatosaurus' name is long-standing and unrelated to the widely publicized, incorrect mounting of another dinosaur's skull on its body in museum exhibits. All we have of Apatosaurus ajax skull are a few badly preserved bones. The first permanently mounted sauropod skeleton in the world was the Apatosaurus at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. It was based on a half-complete skeleton without a skull, and a Camarasaurus-like skull was created for it. The confusion over the names Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus occurred when the same animal was mistakenly given two different names. Othniel Charles Marsh described these as two separate animals, not realizing they were separate species of the same genus. Since Apatosaurus had precedence over Brontosaurus as the first one described, Apatosaurus became the correct scientific name. See Apatosaurus excelsus. This animal became the type specimen of the species Brontosaurus shortly after it was unearthed in 1879. It was first pointed out in 1903 that this animal was more likely a different species of Apatosaurus than a new genus. It differed only in that its features were those of an adult, whereas the type of Apatosaurus ajax was not fully grown. This species is based on one of the best preserved and most complete large sauropod skeletons ever found, though it was found without a skull. Brontosaurus was renamed, but the name was already so well known and beloved that it remains in use. Apatosaurus lewisei. Apatosaurus lewisei differed from Apatosaurus excelsus in minor but significant anatomical details, such as the shape of its neck, ribs, and vertebrae. This species is based on an almost complete sauropod skeleton excavated in 1909 at the site now known as Dinosaur National Monument near Jensen, Utah. Another, smaller skeleton was found lying directly beneath the larger one, and later excavations unearthed 4 different skeletons. These finds include a complete, long, slender skull with nostrils on top and peg-like teeth. For many years, scientists thought this skull belonged to Diplodocus. Well, as you could see, I used to think Apatosaurus was the same animal as Diplodocus. Amargasaurus ischiaticus. This large four-legged plant eater is known, like many other European dinosaurs, from fragmentary finds. For Amargasaurus, we have some tail vertebrae, a forelimb, and parts of the pelvis, suggesting that this animal had a powerful muscular tail and heavy body. The overall anatomy and proportions of the bones resemble those of the earlier North American sauropod Camarasaurus. Alvarezsaurus tuberiferus. The only known skull specimen of this large duckbill is the back half of a skull, which includes part of a nasal bone. This bone had a Roman nose-like swelling on top, similar to that of the crestless Canadian hadrosaur Griposaurus. This skull belonged to a subadult animal. Various limb bones and vertebrae of several other Alvarezsaurus individuals were unearthed from the same deposits. Archaeornithoides dinosauriscus. Archaeornithoides, named in 1992, is one of the smallest of all dinosaurs, perhaps weighing less than 3 pounds. It is known from slender bones from the bottom of its snout. Many of this fossil's features are reminiscent of bird bones, hence its name. These remains also appear to link Archaeornithoides with the troodontids, small advanced carnivores. And, surprisingly, some features of this dinosaur, such as its cone-shaped, unserrated teeth, link it with the Spinosaurs. The Spinosaurs include what were perhaps the largest of all carnivorous dinosaurs, Spinosaurus from North Africa. Archaeornithomimus asiaticus. Archaeornithomimus was the oldest ornithomimid, or ostrich mimic, dinosaur. Unlike later ornithomimids, which had 3 short fingers, Archaeornithomimus had a small, short third finger. This is among the few fragments of this dinosaur to be found, and there is some question remaining as to whether Archaeornithomimus is a true ornithomimid, or another as yet unidentified carnivorous dinosaur. Arctosaurus osborni. Arctosaurus was the first dinosaur discovered in the Arctic region, but was named from just a single crushed partial neck vertebra. It has been variously classified as a prosauropod plant-eating dinosaur, a theropod meat-eating dinosaur, or even a turtle. Because of the poor quality of the specimen, scientists cannot even determine whether or not it is a dinosaur. Amargasaurus superbus. This was a massive 4-legged plant eater, apparently even larger than Apatosaurus. It was the first sauropod described from South America. The specimen consists of a very large forelimb with foot bones. Other isolated material has been assigned to it, but without good reason. Amargasaurus may or may not be a titanosaur. Aristosaurus. Invalid. See Massospondylus. Aristosuchus. Invalid. See Calamaspondylus. Rhinoceratops brachiops. This large horned dinosaur is known from just 2 specimens, one of which is a nearly complete skull, 1.5 meters long, found in Western Canada in 1923. The skull of a Rhinoceratops had a short, thick nose horn and moderate-sized brow horns, which pointed forward into the sides, possibly the result of deformation. Its rectangular bony frill had 4 small oval-shaped holes within it. Compared to other ceratopsids, a Rhinoceratops had a very short nose and face. Only skull bones have been found so far for this dinosaur. Arstanosaurus akurganensis. Arstanosaurus is named from an upper jaw bone and is considered a duckbill, although one of its teeth is characteristic of horned dinosaurs' teeth. Although this fragment does appear to be from a hadrosaur, it has no special features that set it apart from other hadrosaurs. Anchiceratops salsopaludilus. Anchiceratops belongs to the Protoceratopsids, a family of primitive and relatively small horned dinosaurs which includes the well-known Protoceratops. It appears to be closely related to at least one species of Montanaceratops, a North American horned dinosaur. The resemblance between these two dinosaurs, like that of many North American and Asian dinosaurs from the end of dinosaur time, indicates that many kinds of dinosaurs moved between the continents when land masses were joined in the late Cretaceous period. Anchiceratops is known only from a few teeth, a jaw, and some leg and foot fragments. It was a very small animal. Well, creationists think all horned dinosaurs are the same as Triceratops. The larger ones look similar enough to an untrained or miseducated eye that one can certainly imagine them to be like different breeds of dogs. But the Protoceratopsians are much smaller and much less heavily armed. Creationists can take their choice whether they think Triceratops and Protoceratops are the same animal. Azendohsaurus mongoliensis. Azendohsaurus was a large four-legged browser of unknown family affiliation. It was named from fragmentary fossils, including two teeth which bear similarities to those of Camarasaurus. Its back vertebrae appear to be nearly identical to those of Euhelopus, a Chinese sauropod, and these animals may be the same. Azendohsaurus quanxiensis. Doubtful name. This species is based only on teeth. Astrodon johnstoni. Astrodon was a relatively small sauropod, named from its spoon-shaped tooth, discovered in Maryland. Because of striking similarities between its tooth and that of the better-known pleurocoelus, and because they were found in the same place, these two dinosaur names may represent the same animal. Atlantosaurus. Doubtful. See Apatosaurus. Atlascopcasaurus lodzi. Atlascopcasaurus was a plant eater found in Australia, an area well within the Antarctic Circle during its time. Atlascopcasaurus is known from fragments of jaws and teeth. The teeth resemble those of another hypsilophodontid, Cephalosaurus, from North America. Both Atlascopcasaurus and Leelinosaura, another hypsilophodontid from the same site in Australia, were small dinosaurs. No large dinosaurs have yet been recorded from southeastern Australia. Oblisodon mirandus. Oblisodon may have been a tyrannosaurid, a large and advanced carnivore from the late Cretaceous. Unlike all other tyrannosaurids, Oblisodon had front teeth without serrations. Since it was named nearly a century ago from fragmentary remains of teeth and skull pieces, many fossils of hard-to-define carnivorous dinosaurs have been assigned to Oblisodon. Ostrosaurus macillapi. Ostrosaurus is only the second sauropod dinosaur, or large four-legged browser, found in Australia. The first was Rowetosaurus. Like most Australian dinosaurs, Ostrosaurus was named from incomplete fossils, some vertebrae and limb fragments. Its family is unknown. It had long limbs and features which resembled both the giraffe-like brachiosaurid sauropods and the smaller boxy-headed sauropods, the Camarasaurs. However, its closest relations may be among the Cetiosaurids, which were more primitive, long-tailed browsers. Avaceratops lammersi. Avaceratops was one of the smallest true horned dinosaurs. It represents the most complete dinosaur specimen ever collected from Montana's Judith River Formation, a major source of dinosaur remains. Avaceratops had a solid neck frill. Although certain features of the bones suggest that the type skeleton represents a small adult individual with a fused brain case, some paleontologists think Avaceratops is a juvenile of an already known horned species such as Centrosaurus. Avimimus portentosus. Avimimus was a bird-like dinosaur with a slender body, a long and bird-like neck, slim legs, and bird-like feet. As in modern birds, the front of its jaws were toothless. Avimimus may belong to the Tetanurine group of stiff-tailed meat-eaters, but it was considered distinct enough to warrant its own family, the Avimimidae. However, where it fits into the family tree of meat-eating dinosaurs is uncertain. Avimimus seems to have been among the longest-legged and swiftest of the dinosaurs. It probably caught insects and small reptiles for food. Because of its avian characteristics, some researchers have suggested that Avimimus had feathers, though no feather impressions were found with it or any other dinosaur remains. Russian scientists suggested that Avimaimus forearm bones showed marks indicating the possible attachment of feathers. This interpretation has been questioned by other scientists. If feathers were present on Avimaimus, they may have been used for body insulation, not flight. If, as some paleontologists speculate, fast-running small dinosaurs like Avimaimus were hot-blooded, then feathers could have helped to limit their loss of body heat. Azendohsaurus laroussii. This is a poorly known plant eater, the description of which is based on portions of a jaw with teeth. First believed to be a bird-hipped plant eater, an ornithischian related to Lesothosaurus, Azendosaurus was later identified as a prosauropod. Well, since 1993, Azendosaurus turned out not to be a prosauropod at all, not even a dinosaur. Turns out it was a more basal archosauromorph that had convergently evolved much the same way the prosauropods later would, several million years later. Well, that takes us all the way through the A's. We have reviewed from Alocodon through Azendosaurus. Next episode we will pick up with Bactrosaurus. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the Softly Spoken Science Podcast. Good night.